on, guys? Welcome back to the after credit scene. We are here doing our Eternals review. Got to see the movie this weekend, and I've got to say, I thought it was really great. We're going to get into a whole lot of different things, talk about different characters in the movie, talk about the directing, talk about those after credit scenes and what they mean, and then really get into the story, because there was a whole lot of stuff that the trailer was really ambiguous on, and more than usual actually kind of deceived people as to what the plot was. There's a lot of depth there. So before we get to any of that stuff, let's just talk straight spoiler free about the movie. So if you haven't seen it yet, that's fine. When we get to the spoilery stuff, we'll let you know. I really liked a lot of the story. Now, it was very drama heavy. For Marvel, it was different. I like different. I like when they take chances. I like when, even though you've got these superheroes, that they really try to ground them in reality, especially when you have such a big story with Celestials and these characters that are immortal in some senses, and you're introducing a lot of different characters. I went in with really low expectations, really not listening to any of the Rotten Tomatoes scores or any of the hype about any of the different scenes or the things that were in the movie. I went in expecting not to see a whole lot of every single character. You got 10 main characters. And I kind of went in expecting, okay, we're not going to see a lot of some of these characters. I went in not really worried about the fact that it was more drama heavy, or that the story was going to be different or might not fit into the MCU as well as other stories. Now, we've really gotten a steady diet of characters where we're building on old stories and they're just really interconnected. You know, we got spoiled in Phase 3 with things like Thor Ragnarok, where you had Hulk and Thor in the same movie. You had cameos in other movies from other characters, but things like this and Black Widow, where that was a prequel and this one spans thousands of years, I really didn't go into it expecting a lot of connection, but there really was. Having said that, all of those things leads me to say it was really well written. Some of the plot holes, or the things that I thought didn't make sense, ended up actually being explained. A lot of times we get spoon-fed stuff in movies, and this really wasn't that way. It lets you kind of wonder and explain to yourself before it kind of gave you some of the tidbits that you might be missing. And we'll get to those when we start talking spoilers. There were enough moments with different characters where they fleshed out their personalities, where you got to, even though there were 10 characters, I came away from the movie remembering all of their names. Kingo, Gilgamesh, Athena, Icarus, Makari, Cersei, Sprite, Fastus, Druig, and then Ajak as their leader. So there were 10 of those characters, and they all had different abilities. Ajak has the power of healing. Gilgamesh is strong, and his power comes from kind of Hulk-esque. Fastus can manipulate technology. Cersei has the ability to alter reality just by touching it. Icarus has the gift of flight and strength, and can shoot those laser beams from his eyes. Kingo can manifest power through his hands, and he can shoot bolts of light or throw balls of light, things like that. Druid can control people's minds. Makari has speed. Sprite can alter, I almost say perception, but that's probably the best way to say it. She can change her appearance. She can change the appearance of others. She can go invisible, things like that. And then Athena can manifest weapons. She's very powerful. So all of those different characters, I blew through their different abilities. And except for kind of having some notes down here in the corner to make sure that our video goes as planned, a lot of that was just even several days later, just right off the top of my head. So they did a good job of writing those characters and giving them different stories and connecting them differently. You have 10 characters, so some of them are going to get along differently. They're not the dynamics between different characters. And so we could sit here and talk about, well, what's the dynamic between Makari and Icarus? What's the dynamic between Ajak and Sprite? And they all had a few little moments where you could kind of understand their motivations. The acting was fantastic. It was on point when it came to these Eternals early on in their time on Earth, and then later on in their time on Earth, and how they interacted and their personalities and how they grew. Their motivations changed, and you got to see a lot of that. And I really liked that they bounced from different times rather than just showing it to you in a linear fashion, so that we could see what's going on, but we could get a little more character depth and understand what was coming next. It really, really helped out. The battle scenes were a lot better than I thought they would be. Judging from the trailer, I thought, oh, there's going to be a lot of laser beam shooting and just hand-to-hand combat. And then you had some characters that seemed really interesting, but it didn't seem like there was much you could do with them. Fastest being able to manipulate technology. All right, what's he going to do in a battle? What's Sprite going to do in a battle? But being able to see them interact and how they interacted with each other was really, really exciting. And even something as simple as Angelina Jolie's Athena being able to fashion weapons out of her power, out of her celestial energy, was a lot more exciting and interesting when she did it, and the different ways that they did it was really, really cool. And so if you haven't seen it yet, you go to see it. Pay attention to those things. They were really cool. There's the different little subtleties in how they did that. One of the final battle scenes is fantastic. Just with all of those different elements going on at one time. They had a lot of things they could play with, and they really, really did. I think it's one of the most visually stunning Marvel movies, just in terms of cinematography. The way in which it was shot and the way the characters are presented, the way that characters are introduced, the different types of shots, even the use of CG in this movie was not so off-putting that it took away from the film. Something like Thor Ragnarok was I would say visually stunning, but it was more of a, oh wow, look at that. But scenes like some of the flight scenes and the battle scenes between Grandmaster and Thor, just different things like that. The fight between Thor and Hulk, those are big scenes. They're very stunning, and they're like, oh wow, look at that. But they're not something that's, wow, that's pretty. It was just, those were more whoa moments. This had a lot of, wow, this is a really beautiful film. And it really did justice to the characters. It added to the epicness and almost the royalty of, or even though these aren't royal people, they've been around for a long time. Similar to when you watch like a vampire movie, something like Interview with the Vampire, which I know is a little dated, but rather than vampires being something that's hidden in the shadows and very gritty and grimy and that kind of thing, something like Interview with the Vampire shows vampires as very sophisticated and smart and regal because they've been around for so long. They've learned to navigate society and they're wise beyond their years. This movie was filmed in that style, and so to see these characters, even when you saw them in street clothes or doing normal things, they were bigger than that. And so it's hard to describe without giving away some spoilers, but I think you're really going to enjoy it. The mythology in this story is really great. It even starts off with a little crawl that kind of feels like an in the beginning type thing, and so you're getting literal origins of the Marvel universe, the way the universe is described there in this movie, and the things that were done. And we've already seen Celestials and those kind of things in the form of Ego, the Living Planet, some of the storylines that the Collector gave us in Guardians of the Galaxy when he's talking about the Power Stone. You see some images of some Celestials there, but this really explores that, and you get more interaction with those elements than we ever have before. And so those kind of things were interesting and world building, universe building as far as the MCU is concerned. And so I think if you go into expecting something different and just expecting a introduction to new stories and new characters, but also adding some spice and some depth to the things that we already know, I think you're going to be really, really pleased. Maybe a few lulls, low spots, where there's a lot more dialogue and conversation, and not very much brevity to kind of get you through those moments, to get to another fight scene or another big twist or another big reveal. And so some of that has a very long runtime, but it felt like it needed to be that long, and I felt like I got the whole story. I left wanting more, and I wanted to know what came next, but I also left feeling like, okay, we got some resolution, we got a good story. I'm good with that, rather than, oh, what happened here and what happened there, and oh, why'd they leave that out? They could have done this. There wasn't a whole lot of that. It was just, that was really good. It was satisfying. So having said all that, we got to get into some spoiler heavy stuff. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, this is where you might want to cut out. As always, if you don't want to see or hear any spoilers, this is where you need to leave. The biggest thing for me when it came to this movie was how different the story portrayed in the trailer, and it might have just been me, was varied from what we actually got in the movie. There were at least two big twists that you probably could have seen coming, maybe three. Two big twists that they obviously had to keep secret and they couldn't explain to you in the trailer, but one of the elements in the trailer where Ajax is saying, everybody on Earth brought back, the Avengers brought back everybody in the universe, half the universe, with a snap of their finger. The explanation in the trailer was that the blip provided the necessary energy for this thing called the emergence. And the trailer kind of makes you think that the emergence is the deviants, but there's a whole lot more that they just leave out. They leave out a lot of key things, which is fine, they need to. But it meant that I went into the movie thinking, oh, we're going to go this way, and it's just a battle between the deviants and the Eternals. And it took a twist, and you say, whoa, this got way deeper and way more serious, but the stakes were elevated to such a degree that it flowed well. It wasn't like, oh, now they're doing this instead of this. So it fit, but it did mean that maybe from a marketing standpoint, they were really trying to lead me in one direction so that the payoffs were a lot bigger in the movie. Having said that, let's explain the story for those of you that don't really know, or maybe we're a little confused as to the story. So we'll kind of start at the beginning. So Celestials are these godlike beings that we really don't have much of an explanation for where they came from originally, but we do get an explanation for where they come from after the fact. So Celestials give birth to more Celestials, but how they do that is Celestials have to be birthed from an intelligent life. They get their energy from intelligent life. And they are birthed from the womb of a planet. So something like Earth, the core of Earth would house the seed of a Celestial, and that was put there by another Celestial. And as the planet evolved and grew with intelligent life, that Celestial would continue to grow and get more powerful, and it would become a fetus, and it would continue to grow and get bigger. Till at some point the emergence would happen, which is the moment where the Celestial is born and it consumes that planet along with the intelligent life so that it can take its true form. Once it's done that, it has the necessary energy to be able to seed other universes, planets, cultures, intelligent life, all those different things. So it's this leapfrog of a Celestial planting other Celestials, those planets and universes growing, a select few of those dying in order to provide the necessary energy for a new Celestial, and then that Celestial creates new Celestials, and so on and so forth, and that's how the universe has grown. in order to do that, in order to preserve intelligent life on a planet, the Celestials, in this case the one we interact with the most, Arishem, he created what we call the deviants, what they call the deviants. And it's just these monster-type characters that are apex predators. They talk about predators and apex predators in the movie enough to kind of give you a baseline. These deviants are designed to basically protect the evolution of intelligent life. So it's as though Arishem's theory was that the deviants would kill off smaller predators, weaker animals, and that survival of the fittest, that Darwinism would win out, and that the more highly evolved creatures would learn to survive the deviants, would learn to defeat the deviants, would learn to protect themselves from the deviants, and that's where your intelligent life would come from. The only thing that Arishem did not predict was that the deviants would evolve and that they would then start killing off the intelligent life. On Earth, that would be humans. So the humans were the intelligent life form on Earth, and perhaps other forms of intelligent life in other solar systems, Kree and Skrulls and all those things, but that they were not strong enough to overcome the deviants, because the deviants were able to evolve. They were able to overcome any kind of constraints that humans or whoever, the intelligent life form, put on them, and then in doing so continued to be the apex predator. That meant that the circle of celestial life could not be completed because the deviants kept killing off the intelligent life. So Arishem creates the Eternals. He creates these protectors that will destroy the deviants and keep the deviants from destroying intelligent life. So the Eternals are tasked, when intelligent life springs up, the Eternals are sent in, and they protect that world from the deviants. They protect intelligent life from the deviants so that the intelligent life can flourish. What ends up happening, though, is that Arishem has created the Eternals in such a way that they are insanely loyal, and they don't have the ability to evolve like the deviants did, so that his plan has balance. Think the deviants are chaos and the Eternals are order. So Arishem has created this dichotomy of chaos and order that are constantly battling each other, so that the eternal life, the intelligent life, can flourish. At some point, the Eternals kill off all the deviants, and then they just kind of hang around. Their mission is kind of on hold until the emergence happens. Now, the twist here is, one, finding out that the Eternals were created by the Celestials, just like the deviants, that they're related. They're basically cousins of some kind, but that they were created, and that once their purpose is served, their memories will be wiped and they'll move to another universe to keep doing the same thing over and over again. So they're not just 7,000 years old or however old the Earth is. They are eons and millions of years old, because they've continued to be wiped and rebirthed on other planets. Cersei, whenever she takes over leadership from Ajak, ends up being told all this by Arishem, and she sees where she was created, which is basically like this floating galactic lab, and she sees all the different clone versions or whatever they are of her and all of her fellow Eternals. And so if one of them dies, they just get replaced eventually. So that means a couple of things. A little side note, that the characters that you see die in Eternals could come back. Gilgamesh dies, Icarus flies into the sun, which I thought was very fitting, so those characters dying, Ajak dying, they could potentially come back. Maybe not with their same memories, it'd be a different version of them, but they're out there. This movie does not really get into multiverse stuff. Doesn't really bother with that. There's a lot of different ways you could go there, the different decisions that get made. There is a multiverse out there where the Eternals do not stop the emergence and Earth is gone, which is a totally crazy thing to think about, but it's out there. So there's your main story. There's the setup. Now, with regard to what happens in the movie, you get some divergent storylines where some of the Eternals don't really like the fact that they can't intervene. Druig is one of those guys, and in Tenochtitlan, he doesn't like the fact that he has to watch these Spanish conquistadors come in and kill all the natives, and so he intervenes, and he creates his own cult, so to speak. It looks like a cult, deep in the jungle where he is protecting the descendants of those tribes and those Spanish conquistadors. And so it's an interesting take on the story of Tenochtitlan, where there was a big battle and that society seemed to just up and vanish. In our history, they just vanished, but in the MCU, it's because one of the Eternals intervened, stopped the battle, and then moved those people elsewhere. So you get little things like that. You get stories at the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which all but disappeared, and so you get to see how those things came about and maybe how they were destroyed. And it's an interesting choice of our history to interweave these kind of things into it, where you can kind of make up your own mythology, because there was really nothing there. There's a lot of mystery surrounding it, so you can just kind of add to it. I thought that was a really cool directing choice. Beyond that, you have these, the Eternals have served their purpose. They kind of all go their different direction. Ajax says, hey, y'all go live your life. You find out later that Ajax is saying that because she knows what's coming. She's been loyal. She knows what's coming. She's been told. And so you have these different characters go off and live their lives. Kingo becomes a movie star and is able to hide himself by saying that his grandfather and his great-grandfather and his great-great-grandfather were movie stars in Bollywood, and he's just carrying on that tradition. And so, but then you get stories like Icarus and Circe, where they go off and have a relationship for however long, until Ajax tells Icarus what's coming, at which point Icarus chooses to leave Circe because he can't bring himself to tell her, and he can't live with lying to her. So he disappears. Circe thinks that he's just gone forever, doesn't know where he's at, that he just left her. And so she starts up a relationship with this guy, Dane Whitman, who is played by Kit Harington. Really excited to see him in the MCU and moving forward, seeing what he does and brings to the role. I think it's going to be really awesome moving forward, and we'll talk about his role before the end of our video here. But Circe thinks that she's been abandoned by Icarus, only to discover later on that Icarus has decided, when he talks to Ajax again, that Icarus is loyal to Erisham, he's loyal to their purpose, and he kills Ajax and turns her over to the Deviants, allows her to be killed by the Deviants, so that the emergence can still happen, that she doesn't go and tell somebody else her secret, and so that the Eternals will have another excuse to fight the Deviants until the emergence happens. So Icarus knows it's only going to take a few days, but he plants Ajax's body, makes it look like the Deviants have killed her, even though he caused it, and then sends the Eternals out on a wild goose chase, trying to keep them occupied until the emergence happens. The line that I thought was really interesting, that really connected this in a really unique way with the other stories we've heard, is that the emergence was supposed to happen a long time ago, but Thanos stopped it. So because the amount of intelligent life on Earth was right at the threshold of emergence, but when Thanos snapped, half of that life went away. And so there wasn't enough intelligent life to sustain the birth of the Celestial, and so it delayed the event. I thought that was really cool. It gives this little element, this little coloring to those movies, that in his own way, without knowing it completely, Thanos was right. Thanos stopped some really horrible things from happening that would have happened a lot sooner. Now, when the Avengers brought everybody back, it did a couple of things. One, it did provide the necessary energy for the emergence to happen because it brought back everybody. So what would have taken hundreds, maybe thousands more years was able to happen again within, between Infinity War and Endgame, 5 years. So, but it also even further endeared Ajak to the people of Earth. She's almost impressed with their willpower and their passion to live, their drive to live. And she agrees with that, just like Cersei does and several others that take up the fight, that they have earned their right to live in this universe, that they don't deserve to be killed, and that the Eternals can do something about it. Not only because they have endeared themselves to the humans, but because they realize that their lives are not completely free either. So they can make their own choice as to what to do. Now, what that means moving forward, Arishem at the end obviously takes back some of the Eternals and captures them, and you have a few Eternals going on a galactic goose chase for the missing Eternals, since they don't have that little orb that connects them directly to Arishem. And so they get some help there, and that was an amazing after credit scene. We'll talk about that in a second too. But that whole story was really well woven, and the different interactions between the different characters, the way that they all had different opinions. Not everybody got on board with fighting. There were a few that were on one side, a few that were on the other. Kingo says, "Look, I agree with what you're doing, but I can't fight my brothers." So he kind of steps out and doesn't fight. It made for a little different battle, but it also kind of evened the odds just a little bit. Thena had her own war to wage, with going crazy with the memories she was having. And so the different storylines, the different things that were going on really were brought together very, very well. And done in a way that made the story compelling. And so I didn't feel like I was stuck. I didn't feel like everybody was the same. It was all cookie cutter. The diversity was really refreshing as well. And even adding in the elements like Fastus being married and having an adopted son and having a husband and seemingly his husband knowing that he was an Eternal. Just some of those different things were interesting, and it also underscored the fact that not every one of these Eternals followed the same path. They melded into human life and adapted and evolved in their own ways. And even though they're not supposed to evolve, you kind of get the idea that they did somehow at least evolve in a human way. And maybe that humanity, that human condition is what lent them to being more agreeable to fighting for the humans. The story was great. The one thing that I thought was interesting was that that they were tasked with not interfering with human events, and that was where some of their disagreements came. However, the battle that they fought at the end was not just them interfering with their mission, but it had a bigger scope. They're interfering with their mission, but they had some stake in it too. It wasn't just like, we love humans, and so let's protect the humans. There was another war going on over here that they were fighting. It was personal for them in multiple ways, so there was a lot at stake. Which is why I think a scene like Icarus going to try to attack Cersei and stop it can end with him just remembering all of the moments he had with her and just deciding not to kill her when he could, and deciding that his purpose had been fulfilled, that he couldn't kill her, similar to Kingo, and so he takes himself out of the equation. He flies into the sun, and there's a whole lot of metaphor there with Greek mythology and those kind of things that you can throw in there as well. But the actions of the characters made sense, I guess is what I'm getting at. The implications for what's going on moving forward, I think, is what we need to wrap up with here, in addition to the after credit scenes. The leader of the Deviants, having been killed by Athena, is not around anymore. But we assume that all the Deviants have been taken care of. But of the ones that we see all of them die. I don't think that necessarily means they're all gone. They're definitely not all gone from other planets, so they could pop up someplace else, in addition to other evolved versions of Deviants, similar to Crow. If you do a deep dive into Marvel Comics or Wiki, Marvel Wiki, things like that, you can see that there's a lot of different types of Eternals and a lot of different types of Deviants as well, and so they can pop up in different places. Maybe some of these things have happened on other planets, or that a Deviant has left that planet and ends up on Earth. There's a lot of options there and a lot of things that they could explore that you just kind of got to see how they evolved and how things happened on Earth, but it could be happening in other places. I don't really see them pulling those things back in necessarily, unless it's in another Eternals movie, because you can take the Eternals and use them differently now that you've kind of freed them from their cyclical role within the MCU. The celestial body that partly emerged in the ocean, is it completely ice, or is it kind of dead but it still has its components inside, similar to the skull of the dead Celestial that we see in Guardians of the Galaxy in the form of Nowhere, the place that we call Nowhere. People are mining the skull of that dead Celestial for all kinds of elements and all kinds of different things. And so is that something that can happen on Earth now? Or is that Celestial now just a big, huge chunk of ice? I tend to think it's just a big, huge chunk of ice, because Cersei's power is that she can transform matter into anything else. The power that she evolved into with the use of the brainstorm or the unimind or just the extra celestial energy from her fellow Eternals was that she had the power to change an organic being into something else. And so I think it's all ice, but if it's not, that would be okay as well. I think it's interesting now that you have this other element out there, and how is the world going to cope with the fact that there are these super large beings out there? Do they know that it's a godlike being? Does it become a religion? Does it become, there's all kinds of different avenues that they could go with all these different things. And so I thought those different elements being in place gives it, rather than closing yourself in the MCU because the stories are so tightly woven, you actually have elements that in this story that are opening it up to a lot of different avenues where you can approach it over here, you can approach it over there, you can get different pieces and different colorings in all sorts of different ways. The other implications for the MCU: will the Eternals now help? Will they get involved with the Avengers? Do the Avengers even know who they are? They found a very convenient way for all of the Eternals to leave Earth. So anybody goes looking for them, they're not there anymore. So how that happens, where they go, what they do, is going to be very interesting. They have taken it from an Earth-based story, even though it had galactic elements. They took it from an Earth-based story to a very galactically based story. And so I think the Eternals will pop up, but where they pop up, I think is open to a whole lot of speculation. It's going to be really fun to see when they pop up in different stories. And now, is Arishem now an enemy? Is there a Celestial that now has it out for Earth? And by connection, the Eternals that helped destroy Earth. That's going to be a really cool story as well. I was left with a few questions, but like I said, not questions that I needed answered right now. Like I said, I liked the movie. I thought it was different. I thought the different elements that they brought out were really, really cool. Let's end with these two bonus scenes. These after credit scenes were fantastic. There was a lot of talk, a lot of leaks, a lot of rumors about what was coming and how it was going to happen. And but even knowing some of the things that were coming, I still thought it was really exciting. And all of the One Direction fans were so smitten with the fact that Harry Styles was in this movie that they didn't care anything about Pip the Troll. And I was more excited about seeing Pip the Troll than I was about seeing Harry Styles as Eros in this movie. I thought the casting was, at first I thought the casting was a little awkward until he started talking and interacting, and just a little bit that Harry Styles had in that movie, I thought this could be a very interesting character, an interesting connection, and just a unique person to add to the story, especially since his character, because his name is Eros, the idea is that he's very charming and very good looking and charismatic, and so he definitely fits the bill. But what they do with that is going to be anybody's guess. Obviously, you do a little bit of a dive. Eros, by name, is actually Star Fox as a comic character, who is the brother of Thanos, and they have eternal / celestial roots. In the comics, the idea is that there were other, like I said, other Eternals that kind of branched off and did their own thing, and they created their own planet and their own group of people called Titans. Think the combination of God and man type thing from some of our stories or mythologies or whatever. Kind of like Greek gods having children with humans. That all kind of fits, and those characters are actually throughout mythology and have different names as well. But Thanos being a Titan would mean Eros is also a Titan, and they had differing theories about what to do with the universe, and Thanos goes one way and Eros goes another, and then Eros pops up because he sees other fellow Eternals that have done some of the same things that he did, and so he's kind of there to help them navigate that. So that storyline can go all kinds of ways, maybe in Eternals 2, maybe pop up in a Guardians of the Galaxy somewhere, who knows. But if the Guardians of the Galaxy story is ending and those characters are going to go off to different storylines, then the Eternals would be a great place to pick up those characters and put them in a different movie, rather than saying, well, we have to have a Guardians 3 and a Guardians 4 and a Guardians 5, that you can throw them into different movies and keep the stories fresh in the future. I think as far as the MCU from a marketing standpoint is concerned, if you got 10 more years down the road and you have Guardians of the Galaxy 5, you have a whole fan base who did watch those movies, but then you have a lot of younger people that go, well, I gotta go back and watch 4 movies to know where this is coming from. No, you can watch Eternals and see where these characters came from, and maybe you have to reintroduce some characters. It also means that some people are going to bow out, some people are going to die, but I think that's what's going to make the story unique, and it's what's going to give it a lot more brevity moving forward when it becomes a much larger story. So the other after credit scene, which by the way, go and research Pip the Troll. He pops up everywhere. He's got X-Men roots. He's got Fantastic Four roots. He is all over the place. It's a really fun character to see where he's going to pop up, where he came from, what he can do, and you get a little Easter egg of what he can do and why he can do it by the type of portal that is created when Pip and Eros come into the Eternal ship. It doesn't look like any of the other portals we've seen before, so there's something to go and scurry off and figure out on your own. The final after credit scene is probably as big or bigger than the other one, because we see Dane Whitman, played by Kit Harington. He tries to tell Cersei that he has some things that he hasn't told her about. Come to find out, he is from a long line of characters called the Black Knight. And you see this big box on his desk as he sees Cersei get carried away, and he decides, okay, I got to do something, and he decides to he's going to take up the mantle of his forefathers, which is to become the Black Knight. You see that emblem on the box before he opens the box to reveal this sword, this really gnarly looking sword, and it's got some kind of power inside it because he goes to touch it, and it kind of responds to him. That character has been played by a lot of different people in the comic books, but I thought it was really cool to use somebody like Kit Harington, who played such a good type of medieval knightish type character in Game of Thrones, to use that kind of guy to bring that kind of story to life. And so whenever you get to see him one of these days in his garb, I think he's really going to fit that, because we kind of know him that way. So he already kind of has his own little mythology here in our minds. So the casting is actually really, really great there. But as he gets ready to touch that sword, you hear a voice off screen before it fades to black that says, do you think that's a good idea? Or are you really ready to do that? I actually can't remember what he says. But that voice is Mahershala Ali. That was confirmed by director Chloe Zhao, that it was his voice. And if you paid attention at all, he has been introduced as the actor who is going to play the character Blade moving forward in the MCU. Now, whether the Black Knight pops up in Blade, or whether, as some people have speculated, that Blade kind of becomes the new Nick Fury, while Nick Fury is off doing Skrull things. Secret Invasion is going to answer some of those questions for us, what's happening to Nick Fury. But there's got to be somebody else coming around to deal with some of these things. Doctor Strange is going to be one of those guys that deals with mythical, magical threats, like we saw at the end of Doctor Strange, where he sits Thor down and he says, I kind of keep a tab on mythical beings, and your brother Loki's one of those, and that kind of thing. So Doctor Strange is doing that. Nick Fury is presumably doing that with galactic threats. Monica Rambeau was doing the same kinds of things, and we learned some of that in WandaVision. And so who is dealing with some of these celestial threats? Who's dealing with some of these more, I won't say magical threats, but more mystical threats? There's a whole other layer now of things that we don't understand, that are science and magic and all these different things mingled into one, that go back eons. Who's gonna take care of those things? And Blade would certainly be a character that could do that, depending on how long, what his origin story is and how they choose to present him in the MCU. So many things in this movie to talk about and go over. There weren't as many Easter eggs, just in general for the Marvel Universe in general. Like I said, you had the Blade reference, you had Pit Patrol, you had some of the other after credit scenes things. You had some conversations about who's going to take over the Avengers and what's going to happen, and so all of those things are going on, but you didn't really get a lot of, oh, this came from that and this came from this, unless you do some really deep dives into Eternal comics, and there's some really obscure things out there with regard to who the Deviants are and who the Eternals are and who Arishem is and other things that went on, and you can draw your own conclusions there. But I will leave all that fun to you guys and to the comments section below. Thank you guys for listening. This is always a long video when we do these movie reviews, so if you stuck it out to the end, bonus points to you. Thank you guys for doing that. As always, like this video, subscribe to it, turn on notifications so when we drop new ones, you'll be the first to know about it. Share it if you get a chance. That's how other people can learn about the channel and how we can grow from just 60-something viewers and subscribers into 100 and beyond. So thank you guys for watching, and when the next one drops, we'll meet you right back here. See you guys.